Aaron Daniels from the Healthy Creative Podcast shares his passion for creativity with you. If you're looking for interesting creative and design conversations, or just simple and effective ways to get more creativity into your life, then this show is for you. Aaron and his guests deliver simple, effective advice that promotes inclusion into creativity rather than unnecessary exclusion. Creativity isn't just for creative types. The result? A sharper, smarter, more creative you. Now it's time to join your host, Aaron Daniels, for the Healthy Creative Podcast.
Hello friends, welcome to the latest episode of the Healthy Creative Podcast, brought to you by healthycreative.co.uk. I'm Aaron Daniels. I've worked in London's world-class creative industry for a number of years now. I work within design and art direction, but I've got a serious appetite for all things creative. This week, I'm joined by illustrator and designer Sam Real. Sam's been on an amazing creative journey. He's recently written, illustrated, and got published a children's book. Children's books are possibly an area that many people think about doing. It seems simple on the surface, but then many quickly realise that just because it's for kids, it doesn't mean it's child's play. There's a bit more to it than that. But with Sam Real, he's worked hard and he's got there. So today, we're going to be learning about what it's taken. Let's dive in. Welcome, Sam. Before we start, I'd like to say that I am genuinely envious of your name, Sam Real. The real deal. How cool is that?
Yeah, a lot of years at school being teased about it, but yeah.
Teased? Shouldn't you be in a Hollywood action movie or something?
Oh, I don't know about that. No.
One man, one desire to create his own children's book. Anyway, welcome again to the Healthy Creative Podcast. Now, you describe illustration and design as your bread and butter, but what got you into that?
My degree's in branding and packaging, but I think I learned more about my style and what I wanted to do a few years outside of university. And that was more from just observing other artists that I like. I kind of took a period of time basically where I wasn't a creative person. And I think I kind of needed that in order to sort of figure out what I liked, where I wanted to head. And also I missed creativity so much. Even as a young boy, I was always drawing. Writing stories, drawing comics. I did a lot of comic book stories, like cowboy stories and stuff like that. I think that's where it started from. I've always had quite an active imagination, so I think it was my way of kind of getting out of the real world and just putting something down on paper.
The real world, I like it.
Yeah, it all ties in. I've always enjoyed illustration, but I think, like I said, the last few years, I really class myself as a proper graphic designer and illustrator, because I think I've learned to open up. I've learned to see things a bit more clearer. I think at university, I think there was a lot of feeling that I had to, I couldn't open up as much, I don't think, and I couldn't see things as clearly as I do now. Now I look at the world differently. There's a lot that needs to be said and expressed. Everybody has the tool really to express that, and creative people have that outlet. So that's what I'm fascinated by.
So how would you describe your illustration style?
I like to inject colour, positivity and character into what I'm drawing. So characters I create, there is an element of humour with them, especially with my children's book stuff. They're based on real characters as well. They're based on real people. So that helps, but my style, I love detail, the little intricate things that you notice in an illustration, and I try and have little elements of that within my work.
As I mentioned earlier, you've made the journey to getting a children's book published. You didn't just have the idea, you were motivated and you went and you did it. So let's take a walk down the road to getting a children's book published. Can you describe the experience from the initial concept, your light bulb moment, to getting your book with a publisher?
Like I said, I wasn't creative. I wasn't really certainly wasn't drawing, I wasn't illustrating for a number of years. And then my nephew was born, and it was interesting watching him gradually grow up, growing from 1 year to 2 years. I was drawing him as I saw him, noticing his character, and that kind of inspired me to do a children's book about him. It's a very, very simple kind of story. I really wanted to kind of get it down on paper, and that was going to be a present for him. So this all started off from a present for my nephew. I didn't have any intention of it being any wider than that. I didn't see it going anywhere, but I just wanted to try and finish something as well. As a creative person, sometimes you have so many ideas and you start one thing, you don't finish it. So I disciplined myself and I said, right, I'm going to do at least 1 hour a day to try and get this finished. Day one, I think I did some doodles. I always start off initially with just doodling. I find my best ideas come from just free thinking and just scribbling. Got an idea for the character design. Like I said, they're based on real people, so it wasn't too difficult. I know my sister, I know what she looks like, my brother-in-law, they were in it. And then, from that, I moved on to piecing together a storyboard. And that was the next bit, was kind of trying to, work out composition, penciled out some really simple thumbnails. Then I drew out each page, pencil drawing, and then I inked it, scanned it into the computer, got it to a point where I was happy with it. The whole thing probably took about 3 months, from the doodling right through to the kind of the finished pages. From that, I gave, so my nephew had a copy of it. My sister and my sister's friends were saying, you should approach publishers, because this is quite good, this could work. And I thought, okay. My mum was quite pushy behind it too. She was like, we're going to contact publishers. And so I thought, okay, well, the first step would be, I'm going to get 50 copies printed. I'm just going to see what happens, and I'm going to basically take these to schools. I took it to Comic-Con as well, and I'm going to send them off to publishers. Once I've done that, then I'm done with it. I'm like, okay, I tried, I made an effort, then I'm just going to see what happens. So the next step, I went to Comic-Con.
What's Comic-Con, just for listeners who might not know?
Comic-Con is basically like an expo for anything to do with comic books, basically. So that includes films, games, and basically,
Where was it? Was it in London?
It was in London's XL.
Okay.
Yeah, and within that venue they have an artist village where some of the best Marvel artists, and Beano, that was the guy I actually met when I went to Comic-Con. He was a real inspiration to me. He basically took one look at my work and he said, I don't even have to read the story. He said the images, the pictures have gripped me. And he said, that's what you want to do as an illustrator. So I left there feeling really positive. It gave me the spur then to keep pushing with the publishers. I think I contacted about 10 publishers. I got a few responses back. Mostly the responses I got were, they are too small to take it on, it's too much of a risk. I got used to getting those letters back, but then one publisher did take it on, and they were quite encouraging, and I thought, okay, well, I've got nothing to lose. I couldn't believe it, really. I was still in shock by the fact that they'd shown interest. So from that point, then they took my artwork that I had, I left it with them. It was a very long process, though. I think I'd finished the book in 2014, and it actually was properly published June 2018. So it was quite a slow process, and a lot of back and forth, and a lot of correcting, and a lot of changing things.
4 years. What happened in those 4 years?
Specifically, I think what it was, so initially I think it was 24 pages. That's the book I created. And they were going to make it 46, I think, something like that. And although they didn't change much, the story's still pretty much the same. Some of the wording slightly different, the layout of the page is slightly different. It's just how long it takes sometimes. But the end result, I've got to say, was I'm happy with it. I was quite fussy, I think, but then I'm glad I was, because this is one opportunity you get.
Exactly, yeah. At the end of the day, your name is on it.
Exactly. Yeah. And I would absolutely love to have another opportunity to have some work published. So, yeah, nerve-wracking time. But then I think that the most nervous I was the moment I received my copies. Came in the post, and I thought, my word, if this is wrong,
oh, really?
I thought, if this is wrong, literally I will
does the full responsibility lie with you then?
Yeah, most of it. So I was nervous, but I'm very happy with the end result.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah, thank you.
How many times do you tend to draw a character until it's right?
Sometimes I can be very frustrated, because it can be, we're talking 20 times. But generally, the way I tend to work is, if I work in Manga Studio, which is like Photoshop, it's a software where you can use a tablet to basically draw. The beauty of being able to erase and just make something perfect. Generally, I create 3 concepts for every character. So sometimes it can take days to get the character right. Sometimes it needs research alongside it. Other times it's purely from my imagination, and it can be done like a couple of sketches and I could have the character. Mm-hmm. But I think the most important things to capture with a character are the humour behind them, their mood, what features that they might have, that might define their character a little bit. So there's a lot of elements to it that you have to make sure you're hitting all those marks.
So in terms of telling stories for children, what did you have to bear in mind when creating the story?
I think the main thing that I had to bear in mind when I was writing the story was I wanted it to have a good message. It had to have a positive message. And the message is all about acceptance and kindness. It kind of goes without saying that sensitive audience, they are young children, so nothing that's remotely violent or anything like that. So it's purely on, innocence and,
What do you think makes characters appealing for children?
I think the most important thing is, I think they have to have an element of, they have to be genuine, I think. Kids, you can't fool kids. I think they've got to be genuine characters. They have to have an element of humour. My characters have an element of humour to them. It was easy for me because these characters were based on real people. My sister is a very mumsy sort of mum. The school teacher is very authoritative. So that might come across in the actual style of the illustration. And Harry, again, his features, everything about him is very friendly.
So you've written a children's book. Now what? The fact of the matter is, hundreds of thousands of new titles are published each year, so there's more competition to get published than ever before. Let's talk about the road to market. Publishing is a business after all. How did you think about children as an audience with your books?
With regards to the age group, because that was something I was never sure of.
Okay.
Was the age group. Because I initially went and read a story, my first story that I did, I read it to 6-year-olds, and they seemed to really like the story. But there was elements to it that I don't think they fully gripped, but they loved the story. I wasn't 100% sure where it sat exactly, but I know it was perhaps a little bit older than 6, so maybe 8, that kind of age category, which is actually older than Harry is in the book. I didn't really figure that out until I think the publishers kind of knew where it belonged.
How did you assess the competition in the bookstores? There's a lot of kids' books out there with a lot of big character names. How did you make yours different?
What was interesting about this is that I actually went into this with no research whatsoever into children's books, which I actually think helped me. This was something that I had no intention of it being a published piece of work. It was simply for my nephew. So I didn't really look at it from that perspective. And in a way, I'm kind of glad I didn't, because sometimes that can be quite overwhelming when you know what else is out there.
What about self-publishing or print-on-demand books? Did these options ever cross your mind?
I think as I was seeing people take interest in the book, I did think to myself, okay, well, if this doesn't work out with a publisher, I would want to invest, I think, in publishing it myself, just because I think I wanted to tell the story to a wider audience, basically, and I wanted to get my work out there.
So how did you go about finding your publisher? How did that relationship develop?
I just went on Google. I Googled the kind of top 20 publishers in the UK, and I reached out to as many of them as I could, and then I got the addresses. Some of them, a lot of publishers do not accept submissions. You basically need an agent to contact them. There are a couple that I think once or twice a year they have an area where you submit your work, so everybody that doesn't have an agent, first time authors, will go down that avenue. And what was so good about Austin Macaulay is they were willing to kind of take risks. They were a big enough company, they had experience in the industry, and I felt very confident with them. They knew what they were doing. They'd already worked out how my book would do in terms of sales. They'd kind of had a forecast for it. So I felt like, wow, these people, obviously, they're looking to the future.
Can you describe and talk about the different roles involved in the publication of your book?
So the initial stage was with the production team. So it was things to do with layout, amends to the text, the design. They had to redesign the front cover, and there were a few things. That was probably the longest process. Once that was kind of dealt with, then it moved on to the marketing team, and I'm still dealing with the marketing team. That will go on for a few years. They had a publication date for me. They set up events, book fairs and stuff like that. They basically contact all of the retail outlets for me, so they do it on my behalf. It's all dealt with through them.
So how long did it take you from the initial concept, the sketch, to getting your book on the shelves?
I think the whole process took around 4 years, so it is quite a lengthy process, but that's generally how, it takes time. There's a lot of back and forth with publishers, so it took 4 years.
Let's talk about the folding stuff, the money. How do publishers pay authors and illustrators? Are there a lot of people that take a cut?
Obviously, you have a contract at the beginning that you sign, and in that contract it talks about royalties. So basically, the book fees are split amongst the publishers, the author, and the retail outlets, and sometimes there are resellers as well. Resellers will purchase the book and will sell it on. I've noticed through looking online, my book is in lots of different places at loads of different really strange pricing. Resellers will generally sell it on higher, but I've noticed that, and sometimes I'm like, oh god, that's a bit expensive. That's what they do.
So what is success for you in this arena? On the shelves, multiple book launches, what is it?
I think success for me is seeing your book on the shelf is a huge thing. It is something that I've envisioned, and now seeing it, I have to pinch myself knowing that that's a reality. But I think the bigger thing for me is being able to kind of spread a message and express myself, and for people to see that and absorb that and take that in. I think as an artist, as a creative person, to be able to for your work to be seen by lots of people, and for people to have opinion on it as well, that's quite nice. To be able to impact people like that, I think is really special.
What do you hope children take away from your stories and drawings?
I hope children take away the number one, I hope they enjoy the story, and I hope they feel they can engage with the characters, and I hope it just puts smiles on their faces, really. It sounds cheesy, but I know, seeing my sister and my brother-in-law, that when my nephew has to go to bed and they need to read a story to him, it can be sort of 10 minutes, which can be quite difficult, or it can be 10 minutes that can be quite pleasant. And I hope that my story will, kids will be able to engage with my story and enjoy it. And I also hope parents will see, the benefit of the story to their child.
Why is it, do you think, that adult books stop tending to have illustrations in them?
That's a really good question. I really like that question. I think it would be a good thing if they did have more illustrations in adult books, because I think as you get older, I think you lose touch with being a child, and I think it's quite a sad thing that we lose that. Illustrations can generate a feeling, they can generate mood, just like words can, but not everybody connects with words like they do with illustration. You see, some of the books I read as a kid, in all honesty, it was the detail and the illustrations that grabbed me. It was just the humour in some of the things I saw as a kid. I thought that was ridiculous, but it's like, that's kind of...
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So what's in the future for Sam Real?
Well, I hope that I'm going to do more children's books. At the moment, I'm putting the children's books on hold because I've got a lot of ideas going on in my head, and I'm getting into the habit now of actually writing these ideas down because I don't want to lose them. But I've finally kind of got to a place now where I feel the confidence to actually start attacking these. I've got 2 graphic novels that I'm working on. One that I've been working on for years, that I've done so much research for, that is set during the Blitz, World War II in London. And it's a bit of a different story. It's not a children's story, it's a graphic novel for adults. Everything's all planned. It's literally just a case now of completing all of the pages. The other one I'm working on is more of it's a period piece based on true events, so I'm kind of excited. I think creating the children's books has really got my juices flowing, and it's also made me want to actually be brave enough to put a story down on paper and know that, you know what, it's probably the best thing you can do, and the worst thing that'll happen is people might not like it, but ultimately you have to. I feel I have to get this down on paper, but I'm sort of determined to get those finished in the next 2 years, I think.
So it's time to get inside your head a bit more for our listeners. What motivates you creatively?
I think I'm inspired by absolutely everything. There's so many things out there to be inspired by. Even if you're not happy with something, if you're not happy with how things are politically, that is a form of inspiration because you have the fuel then to maybe create something. And I find that there's all sorts of stories out there that you absorb and you take in and you think, wow, maybe, I can use my creativity to express my take on something or reach people in a different way. And I've done an illustration recently it's basically about a child escaping in their own imagination from a war-torn country. The whole city is ablaze, and they're looking down on it. And I just thought, basically, like a message to say that the power of imagination is huge. And he's able to get out of this situation through his mind and escape the misery that's around him. It's things like that, like I feel I need to get that down on paper. And it's, things in the news inspire me and motivate me, more so now, I'd say, to actually create artwork and illustrations that put my spin on things and hopefully connect with people.
How does it feel when you're drawing?
Sometimes I'm desperate to try and be creative. I'm forcing it. I get really frustrated with it because I'm thinking, the ideas aren't coming. I know I'm in the right place when I'm doodling and I feel more relaxed. It's a different place altogether. I have no idea what I'm going to draw. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Each week I try and give myself an hour where I will just doodle and I will just be free of thinking. And it will be some of the most ridiculous things you've ever seen, but it can potentially lead to something down the line. I try to get myself more in that mindset, because when I am focused too hard on trying to be creative, sometimes that doesn't work in my favour, because I think to be creative you have to let your mind be free and open. I've learned to get better at that.
So what's one myth that you would want to dispel to someone who wants to get into illustration but is a bit afraid?
I think the myth that just because maybe you don't have a creative background that you can't be creative, that frustrates me when I hear that, because I think everyone has the capability to be creative, and I always find it unique seeing what anybody draws. I always find it unique and interesting to see, what someone can doodle, because everybody has their kind of vision. You might not think you can draw, but it's expression. And that's what I look for. Anybody can paint by numbers, anybody can look at something and try and replicate something exactly. But when you can learn to just be free and express yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to be exactly as you see it, but if it's your take on it, it's interesting.
So did you have a lot of setbacks and naysayers on your journey?
I think probably the biggest naysayer was probably myself, my own mind, stopping me from really achieving. The fear of failure, the fear of being laughed at. And also there was a couple of people, I'd say, that maybe didn't think I could do it. And I think that gave me the fuel. My own frustration with myself as well gave me the fuel to actually get this started and get this off the ground. And I became quite determined, to be honest with you. I was really kind of sick of not doing things, thinking of having some ideas, having some, I thought, like, ultimately really good ideas that I just thought I'm not going to do them because it's too scary. And being creative is quite scary because you have to let other people see it. And that's the most scary bit, but also sometimes it's the most rewarding bit. So I think I overcame that fear, and I think now the floodgates are open, and now I'm starting to do things. I feel like I've been reborn with it, to be honest.
Who inspires you as an artist?
I think there are several artists that inspire me. There's a guy, Sid Mead. He was the lead designer and artist on Blade Runner, the first film. He's done a few other films. His imagination is what I find fascinating. I've watched some documentaries on him, and I love how his mind works. Everything in his illustration, he has an explanation for. Every car, because it's all futuristic, everything has a function, and I find that
rationalised.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. There's a guy called Kim Jong-gi, who is a fantastic Korean artist. His ink work is out of this world, because he doesn't even need colour in his work. It's just so detailed within the ink work. So yeah, they're two that have really, really inspired me.
So what can our listeners do to improve their skills and knowledge in illustration?
Get into the habit of looking really closely and observing. Learn to master that skill, because that's the number one skill when you're drawing. If you want to replicate something, you've got to look really carefully. The other thing, I mentioned it before, have some time where you just doodle and you draw and you kind of let yourself be free with your illustration, because you might find something gold in that. Many times I've drawn a lot of things that I'd throw away in the bin, but I keep everything now, because you never know what you might come up with. So kind of just trust drawing freely.
So where would you like to send a listener to find out more information about you?
You can go to my website, it's www.samreal.co.uk. I do have a blog as well, so you can access that through the website too.
So Sam, I want to buy Harry's Good Deed. Where should I go?
You can buy the book online, amazon.co.uk or amazon.com, Waterstones, WH Smith, Foyles and Barnes & Noble.
So this last question is a question I ask everyone. What's the biggest thing you know now that you wish you'd known when you started out? What advice would you give to your high school self? Sam Real, age 16.
I would say to myself, don't be afraid, just go for it. I think I was so worried about consequences and, about what people would think as a young boy. I think now I'm a lot more like, you know what, if you've got something to say, say it. If you want to express yourself, express yourself.
So that concludes this episode. Thank you to you, the listener of the Healthy Creative Podcast. I hope you enjoyed that one. I really enjoyed finding out about Sam Real, the real Sam Real's journey to publication of Harry's Good Deed. We're always keen to hear your perspective on anything we've discussed or would like to hear in future episodes. If you're a new listener, please don't forget to subscribe and rate us on the iTunes 5-star rating system. We want to make more of these and get some more great guests on. Until next time on the Healthy Creative Podcast. See you, folks.
That was really good.
Yeah. Good fun?
Like, yeah, some really good questions as well. Like, it got me kind of thinking, oh, yeah.
There you go.